Glad you're able to join us for another edition of the In Focus Candidate Forum. Seems like we were just here yesterday at this time. And a couple of us were. I need to start by thanking Steve Michael, who is our camera operator and who has been here every week that we have been doing this. And we've been counting a number of weeks here now, and we're 7 or 8 weeks into this, and Steve has been here through all of these as just a volunteer community member helping us out. So our thanks to Steve and the rest of the staff who've been in there with us. This evening we'll be speaking with candidates running for the 6th Congressional District. As always, this is a conversation, so we are asking that you join in the conversation. You can call in 973-8587, send a comment or question on Facebook or via Twitter at WCTV Info. A couple of things I need to start off by reminding you. By the time we get to next week's show, if you want to register to vote, that time will be done. So now is the time to get it done. Voter registration ends on Tuesday, October 9th. You can still get it done through tomorrow or Monday, Tuesday of next week, 8:30 to 4:30. At the voter registration office, 301 East Main Street. Also, you can do it online, indianavoters.com. That's indianavoters.com. You can do it on your tablet, do it on your computer, do it on your smartphone. There is an app for that, but we are reminding you to get registered and be ready to vote because absentee voting will actually begin on the 10th, and I'll mention that in just a minute. Want to remind you of our upcoming, maybe I'll do it right now. Absentee in-person voting starts on Wednesday, October 10th. You can do that Mondays, 8:30 to 5, and then Tuesday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 at the voter registration office, 301 East Main Street. Also, there's a couple of Saturdays listed there, October 27th and November 3rd from 9 to 4, and the last day is November 5th from 8:30 until 12. So that's going on. If you need more information, 973-9304 or visit the clerk's vote site. In Focus candidate forums will continue next week. We have Indiana State Representatives for District 56 on October 18th when Brian will be back with us again, Wayne County Council District 3, and we'll wrap up our In Focus candidate forums with the Indiana State Senate race, District 27. That will be on October 25th. All of those are Thursdays with our shows beginning at 6 p.m. I want to also remind you that there are a couple of chances for you to talk face-to-face with the candidates. Hometown Media is having a couple of candidate forums. The first one is coming up next Tuesday, October 9th from 9 to 6 at the Go Lake Community Center in Cambridge City. You see the races that they are inviting the candidates in for there. We will be recording that and showing it back later to the community, but it is a chance for you to go out and face-to-face ask questions to the candidates. The following week, on the 16th, they will be at Hartley Hills Country Club in Hagerstown. That will be focused on the school board races for Nettle Creek, Western Wayne, Centerville, Abington schools, and Northeastern school districts. Again, that's being made possible by Hometown Media Group. And my last reminder, I think it is anyway, is going to be just that we will be here on election night. Melissa Vance and I will have our election night show beginning at 6 p.m. until all of the votes for Wayne County are actually counted and released. And we're hoping that's normally about 9 o'clock. So normally it's a 2.5 to 3 hour program. But we'll be here talking hopefully with some of the party chairs and some of the candidates that are around and maybe a couple of other different people that we'll be inviting in. So join us for live election coverage here at the WCTV studios beginning at 6 p.m. Tuesday night, November 6th. Getting into tonight's show, want to first welcome Brian Ballenger, representing the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. Glad to have you back.
Thank you, Eric.
And our candidates for this evening, Janine Lee Lake and Tom Firkinoff, running for the 6th Congressional District. As we do with all of these, we will start by giving them about a minute to a minute and a half to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll get into the questioning. Janine, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Janine Lee Lake, and I'm the Democratic nominee for the 6th Congressional District. Last time I was here, I was the primary candidate, and I beat out 5 guys to get back to today. So I'm excited to run, and I'm excited to be your next Congresswoman. I am an entrepreneur out of Muncie. I was born in Indianapolis, raised in Crawfordsville. I have four children, 3 sons and a daughter. I've been married for 22 years. My husband works at Ball State University. And I'm running because I'm concerned about the 6th District. I'm concerned about everything from the farming situation involving tariffs and some of the concerns there. I'm concerned about the people down in Cummins that are concerned about potential loss of jobs due to the steel tariffs that are there. I'm concerned about the fact that there aren't safety resource officers in every single school in my district. I have those same concerns as a constituent as I now have as a candidate. So that's the reason why I got in the race, to make a difference. I'm in it to win it, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And Tom.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Tom Ferkenhoff. I'm a lifetime resident of the 6th District. I was born and raised down in Batesville, Indiana area, and spent my adult life here in Wayne County, and I've worked here in Wayne County and Randolph County as a certified public accountant. I've also worked with a firm in Cincinnati as their tax director and also a contract CFO for a couple of manufacturing firms down there. I've been involved in several different ministries within Wayne County, a couple different youth ministries that I've led. I was also the treasurer and board leader for Fountain City Wesleyan Church and led them through a couple of multi-million-dollar building projects a few years back. We've been involved in real estate, particularly in rental housing and also buying abandoned houses, fixing them up. A lot of them we sell to people on contract who wouldn't qualify for traditional housing and traditional loans. And that helps them to become better citizens, also their family. That was one of the things I saw in the youth ministry I did, that when I see these kids now, that some of them are actually grandparents. And just the difference it made in their lives and their kids, their grandkids now, and you make that kind of multi-generational difference in somebody's life. That's what excites me about the opportunity to possibly serve in office, to have that kind of impact on a global level upon people's lives. But as a CPA, I've seen how broken our tax code is. Our tax code is designed to control human behavior, not to raise the money the government needs. And we need to fix that. I've also been, I was a cross-country coach at Northeastern High School for 10 years. I've been very involved in local schools. And I've seen just what's been happening to the schools. And the more the federal government's gotten involved, the less teachers have control of their classrooms, the more our educational system falls behind. And would like to get the federal government out of our classrooms and give control back to the teachers of their classrooms and to local school boards. And but it's been an exciting race. We've really enjoyed the people we've met all around the district, and we're looking forward to this next month.
Thank you both for being here. Just to start off, I'm sure that running for public office is a full-time job. Knocking on doors, walking the streets, raising money, shaking hands. But if you're elected, we, the voters, would like you to be able to do more than just campaign for re-election. You're running for basically what is a 2-year seat. So can you start by telling us what it is that you've been doing to prepare for the office that you are planning on holding? And Tom, we'll start with you.
Okay, to prepare for the office, basically been doing a lot more research of just what their daily lives are, what the job entails, and what the, watching C-SPAN and seeing the good that goes on, the ridiculous that goes on, and really just looking into, any leader to be successful, you have to have a good team. And that's just one of the things, just looking at, okay, what kind of people do I need on my team, both back here in Indiana and in Washington, and just kind of making that mental image and that list of what are we looking for in people, how are we going to find those people, and finding people that aren't already, I guess, established in the swamp.
Okay. Janine?
Yeah, I think kind of what Tom said in terms of researching, the process, because I think that you can probably think, okay, this is how they, legislate and create, and go into committees and things like that, and vote on things eventually. So I've done some of that research. I've actually been looking at some housing in D.C. on a wishful way, but also preparations of that. But I think in terms of where we're at with Congress right now, I'm actually looking a lot at the things that I don't want to be in a congressperson. I don't want to be the congresswoman that comes in and wants to say that, I want to be the adult in the room that's taking care of issues and, I'm responsible kind of behind the scenes. I want to be a bold congresswoman. I want to be able to say, you know what, this is wrong or this is right. This is something that I believe in and I can stand firmly in that. I try to listen to all the issues, no matter what it is, but I'm concerned about the tenor and the temperature right now of those in Congress, particularly by the lack of leadership. I don't feel as if that there's courageous people right now. We're at a time and a point where the people that I go and I talk to these people, our constituents, and they're concerned that the government is kind of out of control. And I hate to say that. Not everybody. I know that we've got people that don't, but there's a large majority of people that are concerned that that we're not being represented in the way that they believe is how we should be represented as a country. They're concerned because there's so much rhetoric and division. Even just this week, in terms of the Kavanaugh hearings and the differences there, and just not seeing really bold leadership say that some things are wrong, even if you don't standing with or against the Supreme Court nominee. That's one thing, but even just saying that there's certain behaviors that we don't condone as Americans. There's certain rhetoric that we don't condone. We don't condone anyone ever mocking an alleged victim of any kind of assault. That's what we don't condone. I'm ashamed of some of our Congress, those in Congress, because I believe that they should come out wholeheartedly and say that is wrong. That is wrong. We still support this nominee, but the rhetoric that we're hearing is wrong. And we don't want our children and potential victims. There's 1 in 5 right now. 1 in 5 girls from Indiana girls, by the time they're 16 years old, they're sexually assaulted. So what does that say to them? Wouldn't it have been nice if we had some voices out of Congress saying to them, you know what, we hear you. Someone is going to be able to listen to you, and I want to be that voice. So some of the things that I'm hearing are the voices that some of the things I'm seeing make me want to be a 180 from that kind of behavior.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I think my first question I'm going to introduce will be, we'll just say a softer question, then I'm going to have questions that will get much more specific as it relates to business. But to begin, I'd like to know, what do you feel like is the top priority for you? What do you see going on in Congress as it relates to our country today that's not being addressed, that you feel is an issue for the constituents of District 6? And how would you propose to confront that?
Janine, we'll start with you.
Okay. One of the biggest things that I see is a problem, and it affects, the reason why I'm bringing this up, because it affects so many different areas, is healthcare. And whether it's physical health care or mental health care, I think it affects us in terms of being able to have a good job. If we're worried about our health and not able to be participatory into the job market, it affects our mental health. That's very costly, and I see there's 400,000 Hoosiers that are on HIP 2.0. They're concerned because they almost got their health care removed from them this past year. In terms of the Affordable Care Act, there's so many concerns about whether or not if I have a job, or if I don't like that job or I lose that job, do I still have my health care? Healthcare is tied to so many things, and pre-existing conditions. Children now have diabetes and asthma at such a high rate. It's the one thing that I think above everything. The opioid crisis can never be really linked to that, because there's a lot of people out there that are self-medicating. They don't seem to be able to, really have access to good mental health care. So they're just taking care of themselves in the way that they think, and it's caused a lot of problems with that. So I think above everything, I think healthcare can be tied to so many things, economics. Like I said, there's just so many areas that I'm seeing that healthcare can be tied to. So I would definitely be a proponent of either fixing the Affordable Care Act, because it does need to be fixed. Right now it's been gutted so much. There's high premiums, there's low access. Either fix it or maybe bring in Medicare for all. So that's the biggest thing I think that I would like to work on.
Tom?
For me, the biggest issue I see is the deficit that we have that nobody's working on. I mean, I think on economic issues, there's been a lot of areas where President Trump's been very successful. One of the things he pledged to do was work on cutting spending, but he's just signed off on another big spending bill. And we've got over $20 trillion of debt in this country. That doesn't include the $6 trillion of unfunded pensions. It doesn't include a lot of other unfunded liabilities. And currently we've got about 3.3 trillion of tax revenue every year and over $4 trillion of spending. And so not only is that difference borrowed, but like in the next 12 months, there's $4 trillion worth of debt payments that come due. And one of the things that's happened over the past several years is interest rates have gone down. People who are buying treasury bonds aren't buying the long-term bills. They're not going to buy a 15 to 20, 30-year note and only get 1% or less than 1% interest on their money. But they'll buy a 12-month note at less than 1%. And so we're seeing more and more debt come due every year. It's like this year, we're going to have to borrow $5 trillion to meet our deficit, plus pay off the debt that comes due. And 47% of this debt is owned by foreign individuals, with the largest part of that being China. The vice president was on TV today talking about the danger of China. Well, China's getting close to owning this country and owning this debt. And basically, we're just borrowing from MasterCard to pay off our Visa every year now with our national debt. And what's going to happen with people don't buy T-bills. And the other thing there that we're not paying attention is, as I said, we've got very low interest on this debt now. Well, currently, I think the 5-year T-note is 3%, where it had been less than 1%. So like this $4 trillion that renews, we're going to pay an extra 2% of interest on that. As this whole 21 trillion renews, eventually that rate's probably going to be up to 5% as interest rates go up. Well, 4% of $20 trillion is another $800 billion every year that we're adding to our expenses just to pay the interest on that debt. And so at some point, we've got to make some really hard-line decisions to cut spending, and some people are just going to have to stand up and do that.
And also, don't get into any more wars, because that's what isn't that the biggest thing that in the last since World War II, they were just spending trillions and trillions of dollars on. I mean, it's ridiculous. Let's try to be peaceful for a little bit, because that's a lot of our debt.
Yeah.
You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with candidates running for the 6th Congressional District, Janine Lee Lake, Tom Ferkenhoff. Thank you very much for being here. Go to Brian for another question.
Okay, now let's get a little more specific. The 2018 tax reform, H.R. 1, which is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. My first question is whether or not you were in favor or are still in favor of that tax cut.
It's a very comprehensive bill, so it's hard to say we'd be in favor of everything within the bill. Overall, I think it was a good bill, especially on the C Corps. We have put and in a lot of ways, we expect a lot out of our businesses here in the U.S. And we also expect them to compete on a global basis, and whereas other countries give their business business community a lot of slack that we don't. So to expect them to be paying a corporate tax rate is almost double what the average rate was around the world. We were putting them at a great disadvantage. And also, getting that rate down gives businesses less incentive to move overseas. One of the things that we've had was all these businesses that were moving their headquarters overseas over the last 20 years. That has come to a stop because there's no longer that incentive. And there's no way to legislate them to stop them from doing that. So that's going to be a big thing we're going to see the benefit from. We're also seeing a lot of their earnings being repatriated to the U.S. and being taxed. And that's going to create some revenue in this year. A lot of the disincentives for small businesses to be successful have been removed. The 20% deduction for non-professional business, I think that's going to be a very positive thing for our business communities. And we're seeing it in growing wages, and it's been a very positive thing. A lot of these corporations have passed some of these tax savings on to their workers, that we're seeing higher starting minimum wages that the corporations have set upon themselves in addition to the bonuses they gave. So overall, there's been more positive than negative in that bill.
Okay. Janine, how would you respond to that?
I'm in agreement too. I think that it's important that, one, we do everything that we can to incentivize businesses to keep jobs here. Obviously, that's a concern. We've seen that here in East Central Indiana many times, and God knows, I think when my predecessor a couple of congresspersons ago, Mike Pence was here, we lost 20,000 jobs during the 12 years that he was congressman. We need to look at every single avenue to be able to keep our jobs. And then also what you said about small businesses. As a small business owner, that is something that has been very important to me. I've owned for 11 seasons a little ice cream shop called Grandma Betty's Ice Cream Shop. And then now I'm in my 12th year as the owner of The Good News, which is a newspaper that focuses on Christian news and also minority news. It's imperative that we give people an opportunity to want to continue to build America. We look for every avenue, it seems like, to hurt people business-wise, and so yes, I'm definitely in support of that.
If I can do a follow-up real quick. You mentioned increase in wages. Obviously, Amazon just mentioned that they're going to increase their wages to $15 an hour.
Right.
Sounds like, I didn't get to read the whole thing, sounds like that's their full-time as well as their part-time. The federal government has not done anything with its minimum wage for a while. Is it time for the federal government maybe to step in and suggest that wages need to go up for those businesses that aren't taking that next leap? And I'm not saying they have to go to 15 to start, but is it time? We've got a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, which is nowhere near a living wage for most people. Janine, we'll start with you.
I would definitely say I'm in support of that. I'm sure Tom would be too. Here in Indiana, yes, it is $7.25, and the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. And I'm encouraged by businesses like Amazon that have taken the step toward that. I wish other businesses across the board would look at that as well. Think about it. If it's $7.25 an hour and you work 40 hours a week, are you going to bring home $200 a week? I mean, if you work 40 hours a week, I can't stand when people say, there's jobs out there, the unemployment rate is low. That's true, but those are stagnant wages. It's extremely hard to even dream. It's very hard for families to dream for themselves or for their children when they're working really hard 40 hours a week. And then also sometimes they're having to work 2 jobs 40 hours a week. So that's 80 hours a week to make about $500 a week take-home pay. Which then again leads to the fact that they can't spend very much time with their children because they're working all the time. I've seen on the campaign trail, I've seen time and time again, father after father, mother after mother, saying the same exact thing. A lot of them are working more than just one job. And it's a shame because we have to be, again, one of the themes of my Change in the Heartland theme is that we have to have not only a change of how we process things, we actually have to have a change of heart, because these companies are making, the CEOs make, I think I read literally somewhere recently, one of the CEOs was making $1,500 an hour or something like that, but yet they decided that they couldn't increase the wages for their fellow employees. That corporate greed has to stop, and we have to hold them accountable. We have to say, you know what? We do not support that. We will not elect leaders and people to Congress that will continue to give these big companies these abilities to do this and not support the common man. Right now, Wall Street's looking pretty good. The people that have the money, that have stocks and bonds already in the market, they are doing good. We've got a little bit ourselves in terms of investments. But at the same time, too, what does that mean still for the person that lives right here in Richmond? How are they doing? Because it kind of makes you wonder. I've been out a little bit. I took a little tour down to Townsend Community Center. Townsend Community Center doesn't have a roof. Townsend Community Center is not open right now. Townsend Community Center for 70-some years, I believe, maybe even longer, has served this community in a wonderful way. It's served the underprivileged here. It's served the needy, and right now, that's not even being taken care of. So I have some concerns about whether or not we're really doing that great outside of Wall Street.
On the minimum wage, I don't think there should be a federal minimum wage. I mean, standards of living across the country are so different that to say you have to pay the same minimum wage in Lynn, Indiana, as you do in Hoboken, New Jersey, where it costs 6 times the amount to rent an apartment, makes no sense to me. When you talk about big corporations and what they pay their CEOs, I'm not aware of any public companies that pay anybody minimum wage. I mean, even Walmart starts people out at $11 an hour. The people I see making minimum wage are high school kids working at Dairy Queens in the summertime. Some of the people that are part-time in nonprofits, even people, the Goodwills of the world that hire people out of prison trying to give them jobs and starter jobs. Even fast food places around here are hiring at close to $10 an hour starting out, and most of them, when I talk to people, they're getting raises after 3 months when they're starting to become productive. So I mean, that minimum wage takes away a lot of the incentive for people to improve themselves. This last time we saw them take the minimum wage from like 4.25 to 7.25 in 2 years, and like I had some fast food clients where if somebody hiring on could be starting at minimum wage and getting raises, and shift leaders were making $8 an hour. Well, when they bumped the minimum wage up, shift leaders were still making $8 an hour. That increased the cost of living all around, and basically those people who had worked themselves up to a better position were losing buying power. Senior citizens who are on fixed income, as we artificially inflate wages and inflate prices, they lose buying power. And they'll get a small increase in their Social Security, but many of them have annuitized their IRAs, or they've got a set pension where they get $800 a month, and that's what it's going to be for the rest of their life. Well, they don't get any more buying power. So when we jack the minimum wage up, we take away their buying power and make life more difficult on them. And we've even seen it this Amazon. Amazon dropped the other shoe this morning when they announced that they were doing away with quarterly bonuses and stock awards. They have productivity bonuses, so it's now like, okay, the people who were actually making more than $15 an hour, even though their pay rate was 11, but they were very productive, they're not going to get their productivity bonus. So those people who are more efficient employees for them are going to be making the same as the person working next to them that's not getting as much done. The supervisors are already making $15, $16 an hour. They're losing their bonuses and their stock awards. And so they're actually taking a cut in pay by losing those bonuses. And so is it now worth it to take on all that extra responsibility if I'm not making that much more than the minimum? And that's what we see when we raise the federal minimum wage on a drastic basis.
Watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11, speaking with Tom Ferkenhoff and Janine Lee Lake, candidates for 6th Congressional District. If you have a question, send a comment on Facebook, also 973-8587, or send it through Twitter at WCTV Info. We've got, I think, a couple of chat questions. We'll get to one of those coming up in just a minute. First, we'll go back to Brian Ballenger with the Chamber of Commerce for another question.
Okay, Tom, you touched on this earlier in the segment. A concern that I have, I read economic reports, and we find that for several quarters consecutively, our national revenue is increasing, our GDP is increasing, but yet consistently we see the deficit, the national deficit, rising. So obviously we're bringing in more and more money through tax revenue, but we're not seeing an offset in the spending. So you touched on it, but not picking on you, but we didn't get into specifics. Right. So I'd like each of you to address the specifics of just exactly how do we attack this deficit when for multiple quarters consecutively we have increasing revenues. So how do we go about fixing this, stopping the bleeding, so to speak?
Yeah, and we have to cut spending, and in my mind, now is the time to do it. When we've got a booming economy, when we've got jobs available for people, now is the time to cut the spending. And one of the things that makes it hard is when you talk about cutting government spending, a lot of that spending is people's jobs. If we say, hey, we want to go cut spending 20%, that could mean laying off an awful lot of government employees. And now we're in a time where businesses are looking for people. Businesses can't hire enough people, so jobs are out there for people. From that aspect of people losing their government jobs, the jobs in the private sector are there for them to move to at this point. But we really just need to get tough and make some tough decisions on cutting some of these departments. Obviously, when I talked about education, I'd like to see the Federal Department of Education, a lot of the bureaucrats cut back on, so our schools could have control of their own destiny and the way they teach. Our military, I think a lot of our overseas military can be cut back. We want to have the top military in the world. We want the best protection in the world. but we don't need to be the world's police force out there. And fortunately, now there are some of these people who would go into the military, to high school. There are other career paths for them to take at this point. So it's the time to capitalize that and cut some of that spending. I mean, we saw, and we may need a convention of the states and a change to our Constitution to force this upon our Congress, because we saw several years ago they passed a law saying that if they don't balance the budget, there's automatic cuts that go into place. Well, since this is a law, what they do every budget cycle is they just vote to bypass that rule and take that pressure back off of themselves. And so the people are going to have to step up and do something and force our Congress to balance their budget and make those cuts.
I agree. I know in terms of overspending, one of the things that I've talked about is the fact that there's $716 billion, I guess, with regards to the Pentagon that's spent every year. And it's never been audited. It was supposed to be audited this year, but I don't believe the audit is complete, and it's almost the end of the year. Everything from, mercenaries, which doesn't seem to make sense, because we have soldiers that we train for the very same skills that we then go and hire people for. It doesn't make sense that we're doing that. And then we've done it for years and years and years. If we could look at, more of the spending that we've just been doing time after time after time, everything from the fact that I know it's, maybe not popular to say, but every time, our president takes a trip to Mar-a-Lago, it costs $3 million in, security and all that. And if he's gone 200 times, what is that, $600 million? I mean, or he's going to continue to go. I mean, by the time we're done, we're going to be paying, $1 billion for him to take vacations. I could see a lot of that money going back somewhere, practically speaking. As a mother, I'm going to tell you what, I have 4 children. And when things get I always call it my lettuce budget and my ham hock budget. And I look at the idea that sometimes, when there's a season in our life, if something's coming up, I know the kids, are getting ready to go to college next year. Well, then I have to start cutting back. It's practical. It's not even like, to me, it's not these high-end kind of, I know the numbers and things like that, we have to look at line item budgets and things like that, but it's at least having the idea that when you go in dealing with a specific problem, that that you do have to cut back when you have to cut back, and then you have to put a little bit more here and a little bit more there. Most mothers across the 6th District know exactly what that means. I'd like to see, less, we talked about the State Department, not necessarily, maybe looking at why are we at every single place that we're at, not necessarily saying that, we shouldn't be in safekeeping missions across the world, but, we're everywhere. And like Tom said, we're policing the world, and we have been policing the world for a really long time, but do we really need as many units there? Have we had cost analysis to make sure that we still need to be there? A lot of this money could be, spent elsewhere. We're saying we don't have money for health insurance. We don't have money for better wages for our teachers. We don't have money for the things that really affect us on an everyday basis. And I think that we take a little bit more time and hold Congress accountable to the way that they're spending and how it affects us. We can do that. We can do that by voting.
Yeah. And we need to change the way budgets are done. To have one big omnibus budget bill where a congressman gets to approve all or nothing. There's no board in America, any corporation that works with that. No corporation that I work with works like that. The board will look at each different area and make cuts in this area and that area to get in line with what they need to do. And our federal budget needs to be passed in segments. The Congress needs to vote on different sections of it separately and not just one giant. And just the way they do that and allocate budgets, it encourages overspending. And we need to just have some business sense in Washington.
You're watching an In-Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. There have been questions, and obviously I hear voices in my head sometimes as our director talks to me, that there are questions on social media saying that there are 3 candidates running for the 6th Congressional District. There are. All candidates were invited. 2 decided to join us this evening, and 1 did not. There was a question, I think your answer on cutting some spending has brought forward a question, so we'll give you, I think it's directed specifically to you, but we'll give you both potentially a chance to answer the question. When Tom says cut spending, does he mean cutting Medicare and Social Security?
No, I mean those are, and that's what I talked about at the beginning of the program. I said as far as our deficit, just our deficit, we have all these future liabilities that are promises that we've made. I mean, it's important that we keep any promise that we've made to people. Another unfunded liability out there is the care of all of our veterans. I mean, the people who have been injured in these wars that we've been fighting on behalf of other countries. We've got billions, maybe even trillions of future liability to care for these people that are not booked in that we've got to take care of in future budgets. But Medicare and Social Security, I mean, those are things that have been promised we need to take care of. Now, as far as the current program, there are some things that can be done there. Medicare should be allowed to negotiate drug prices. I mean, they've not been able to. Any insurance company can go and negotiate drug prices with the drug companies. Medicare has been barred from doing that to get better prices through the Medicare program. Medicare is the largest purchaser of prescription drugs. They should be able to get the best prices instead of paying the highest prices. So yeah, there's some changes we can make there, but not in cutting benefits for people. On Social Security, there's some things we can look at there. One of the things, if you put your Social Security off beyond your normal retirement age, it goes up by 8% per year. When that was first set up, I think the average interest rate was 6%. Well, as interest rates went down, we didn't lower that. And that should be tied to some Treasury rate plus 2% maybe of what those benefits will increase by for people who can afford to wait for their Social Security. Because usually the people who are waiting are people who are either still working a decent job or who are a little better off and don't need that money. The other thing we can do in Social Security is do away with the rule that if a parent gets Social Security, the child automatically does. And I'm not talking about when a parent dies or becomes disabled, but if a parent starts to draw their old age Social Security or the normal retirement Social Security, if they have a child under 18, that child starts to draw. And I've seen this several times in my practice. It's always a very well-off gentleman married to a woman who's maybe 30 or 40 years younger, and they've got a younger child, and that was never built into the system. I don't know if Donald Trump draws his Social Security, but he's 70 years old and has like a 12-year-old son. If he draws his Social Security, his son gets Social Security, even though no money was ever paid in on behalf of his son. And I think we need to take a hard look at that rule and cut back on that. That could be a way we can save on Social Security without hurting families who rely on their Social Security.
It was directed toward Tom, but I'll give you a chance to speak to the issue of Medicare, Social Security, potentially cutting that.
Well, I'm certainly not a proponent of cutting either one of those, particularly when you look at the idea that for women that are over the age of 62 and rely on Social Security, 40% of them, 45% of them, that's their only measure of income. So they're single women, a lot of those women, and that's what they're relying on for their, for their livelihoods. And they're struggling with that number. I think we need to look at, like Tom said, there are some things that you should, look at in terms of Social Security, but I know that a lot of people that I've been talking to, they're concerned about whether or not Social Security people are borrowing money or putting it over there and using it for this and that. Those people worked hard for Social Security. They deserve every single penny that they put in. These senior citizens are concerned that that already it doesn't quite meet their needs, and in the future, I think we need to make sure that Social Security is protected.
You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. Thank you for the question. We have another one that we're going to go ahead and get to. We want to get to as many viewer questions as we possibly can. So the next one up, if elected, what efforts will you make to stay connected to the communities you represent? If elected, what efforts will you make to stay connected to the communities you represent? Janine, you start this one.
Sure. Well, yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, I think maybe yesterday, a couple of days ago. I've been a lot of places here in the 19 counties. Every single county, I'm thinking maybe me and Mr. Tom here, we've run into each other many times, haven't we?
Yes, we do, on a regular basis.
It's good. But we never run into Greg Pence for some reason, or rarely. I think I've run into him. I've been running since July of 2017, and I've run into him a couple times. So he does get out there sometimes. But that being said, I went to Luke Messer's office a couple days ago, and I knocked on the door, and nobody answered. I came back a little bit while later and rang the doorbell again, and someone finally buzzed and asked me what I was there for. I was like, I'm a constituent, because despite the fact that we don't see our congressperson, Luke Messer, right now, he's actually still all of our congressmen until the end of the year. But yet, people don't have access to him. It's been the thing. Where's Luke? Well, I kind of would have to think that at this point, you know what? I don't want to be that kind of congressperson. I want to be the congressperson that someone can literally call me on the phone, email me, get in touch with us through social media, whatever avenue that you have to do to reach me. Now, since I'm new to this, I may have to figure it out a little bit. I may have to research the issue that you're dealing with. Someone asked me the other day about something about a Native American reservation issue. I didn't know what that was. I had said, you know what? I'm going to talk to my team. We're going to see if we can find out. She asked me about a specific act that involved a birth on a reservation, and I just didn't know that. I don't know everything. I know a little bit about as much as I can, but since I am an outsider, I'm not a regular politician. I just have to say, you know what? We'll give us your information. We'll go back, see if we can find out as much as we can, and find a solution. But my promise is that just like with her, we've already researched it and actually made contact with her. We're going to make sure that we get back with you. I don't believe, that if you're going to be in this position, I always say inside the word representative is the word present. And there's no sense in anyone, in my opinion, running for this office if you're truly not going to be a representative of the people. I'm a community leader. I've been a community leader for 30 years. We run a group called Feed My Sheep, which feeds about 2,000 people a hot meal, gives them groceries. And I work with Ryan Kerrigan's sister. He's a football player, an NFL football player in Muncie. She provides kind of hygiene packages, and so we give those out as well. Thanks, Christina. So I want to be the type of person that, it doesn't make a difference what it is. If you're dealing with windmills, they don't, they had some issues and some serious concerns about windmills in Henry County. They're concerned right now with brown water in Knightstown, brown water coming out of their faucets. Like I said before, farmers across the district have been concerned all year that their soybeans are down a couple dollars a bushel, corn's down. Their concerns, for aluminum and steel. So, I want to be able to go and listen, and maybe I didn't know about this particular issue before, but talking and being present is going to be the best way to be able to be the best representative that I can think.
So staying connected to the community.
Staying connected.
Yeah, I talk a little bit this in my pledge to the people that have on my website. And one thing is we'll continue to have our home here in Indiana, and we'll have a basic apartment in Washington, D.C., and we'll continue to live in Indiana and come back to the state as often as possible and be accessible. Like I said, it is a challenge in that we cover 18 full counties and part of Scott County. So it is difficult to get people physically out everywhere. But if a community wants to have a town hall, I'll do everything I can to be there. People may not agree with every vote that I cast, but I'll always be there to give why. On my website or Facebook page, I'll try to make accessible why I cast the vote I did and what all the factors are, because there's always, pros and cons. There's always unintended consequences that you can see from different decisions that might be made. With mass communication now, social networking, there's all kinds of ways to stay connected with people. But obviously, it's impossible for one person to stay connected with every citizen of the district. And as I said before, you've got to have a good team, and that team's got to include people who will listen, people who care, and people who can filter through of what needs to rise to the top, and people who can take care of issues without getting the congressperson involved or with.
Okay. You touched on this, and I think you both have mentioned healthcare has been a topic, and also veterans issues have been a topic. And you mentioned that that's a liability that we have, and one that we should pay and pay well. But political leaders on both sides have failed to follow through with what's going on with our veterans, and particularly their health care. It's pretty uneven. Some places things are going very well, other places not so much. As you've kind of looked at this, what do you think needs to be done to revamp our system, better use the technology that's available to us to provide our veterans with what it is that we have promised them? And I think, Tom, you start this one.
That's a good question on specifics. Especially when you say at the modern, I mean, the medical field changes so much, and it's difficult for any organization to keep up with that. But just like we need to have the best computer people for our cybersecurity in Washington, we have to get the best technology out there to the VA hospitals. We may need to look at more partnering with other community hospitals and making other things available to our veterans to get the kind of care. And a lot of it is we just need to stop spending money on things the government should have never gotten involved in to begin with, so we've got the money to cover those things that we really are committed to. Like I said, on the current things, we've talked about us being the world's police force. And I know President Trump has been on the other NATO countries to pay their share. For too often, we've carried the financial burden of protecting other countries. We need to keep that pressure up, so that the cost of, if our military isn't in their country and we're covering somebody else's cost, that we're getting reimbursed for that, so our tax dollars can be used to cover the expenses of our veterans that we've promised to them.
Well, this morning I was, before this forum this morning, or right now, I was in Brookville, Indiana, in Franklin County, and I met a guy named Dustin who served for 4 to 5 years in the Iraq War. He's a Marine. He came back, and he was telling me he was, I believe he was hit by an IED. Is that what it's called? When the thing blows up on you. Okay. He was hit by that, and he's got some recurring health problems because of that, a lot of neurological things. He came back to Brookville. He has 5 children. He's married. Just a wonderful person. And he has to go across the state to Ohio, to Cincinnati, to receive some of his benefits, which seems kind of strange considering, why don't we have, the closest one is up to Indianapolis. He also talked about the fact that you have to now, I guess, if you're a veteran, you have to make an appointment to be able to be seen instead of just walking into some centers. It seems rather strange that if we say that we're patriotic and we love our vets and we support our vets, when they get home they're having these problems. Not only did he have a situation involving some of his health concerns, he told me it was okay to tell his story. He became, because he really didn't have great access to health care, to mental health care at the time, he became involved in heroin use. And so then he talked about, having to, come back from that as well. So these veterans are really, we have 46,000, I believe, in our district, and they're facing a lot of issues. They're aging. They're concerned about what good they're doing. He talked about, as a man, he came back, and even though he does have some problems, he still wants to be contributing to the society in some ways. So we're going to try to, when I win, we're going to try to put him to work in some area where he can volunteer and mentor, because he can't really work full time because he is disabled. But he can help give back a little bit in his community. And so we're looking at ways to engage the younger vets with the older vets. So,
yeah.
Right. Would each of you provide an assessment of the economic conditions or the status of the economy for District 6, and how would you propose making changes that would affect or create impact to our local economy? And then secondly, I want to have maybe a follow-up question to that. Do you favor the recent or the latest income tax cuts, and are you in favor of those being permanent?
Janine, I think you start this one.
Do I
I've
think?
got my back and forth correct.
Actually, if you maybe just start with your assessment of the economic conditions that we have currently in District 6, then maybe follow up with the second question.
Okay. Well, I know that Indiana, has low unemployment. We've traditionally been.
I'm going to pause you right there for a second. We're going to have Tom start to answer because we're going to make a mic adjustment on you. So Tom, why don't you start the answer for me?
Okay. Yeah, as far as the overall financial condition of the district, I mean, what I see in talking to people, what I see in my own clients is that we really have had unprecedented growth. I mean, people are working. We're seeing wages starting to rise, and we're starting to see businesses businesses that were struggling to make a profit are starting to become profitable again. The number one issue we really see right now is having available workers. When I talked to the Greg Beinmer, who's a state rep and also Randolph County Economic Development Director, he said, they're almost like not looking for new business to come into Randolph County because the businesses there can't find qualified workers. And so, the number one thing we need to focus right now on is training, and not just for college, but vocational training for the jobs that are out there, the manufacturing jobs of today. That we need more qualified people. People need to come out of school with a work ethic and knowing to work. I had spoken to an assistant superintendent a few years ago, and she said the number one problem they had right now was motivating, and this was in a rural school, that they had a number one problem was motivating kids. And she said, kids will say, well, why do we need school anyway? And I said, well, so you can get a job when you get out of school. Why do I need a job? Well, so you can get a paycheck. And it's like, well, my mom and dad have never worked, and they always get a paycheck because they've heard mom and dad say, well, did the paycheck come, or is the paycheck in the mailbox? Because they're the second generation that's lived in the welfare system and have made it that way. So we need to do a better job of requiring training and to get people off of welfare, to let people know up front, this is not going to be a lifestyle thing, and that you've got these training opportunities now while you're young, and you need to take available of those and get that training. But we also need to make sure that we've got the vocational training out there. It concerns me that we're seeing some schools, because of budget cuts from the state level, start to drop their vocational programs. And I think we're at a time where it's just critical to have that. I mean, the skilled trade jobs out there that are going unfilled, we're hearing more and more about that every day, that there's just tremendous opportunities for kids, and we need to make sure that they get tuned into those and get the training.
I agree. I think that it's important to have those jobs, welding jobs, those kind of skilled labor type of things. We have something in Muncie called the Muncie Area Career Center that encourages people that aren't necessarily, college-minded or college material, as they say. It's important that we let children know that there is no stigma in not becoming a doctor or a lawyer. I think we're shifting, I believe, into an area where we don't have to just be perceived, I guess, in one way. And I hope that children that are coming up through high school feel that way. I've got one child who probably could probably break into the Pentagon because his skills in terms of computer skills and his high-level academics. But then I've got another child, and you had to guess which one it is because I have four. That's not his level. He's really actually struggled sometimes to be able to find his place. But he's been able to just recently sign up for the military, so he's going to be doing something else totally different, and hopefully learning some skills there that he can then come back to this area and then work. I think it's also important that we build our educational our opportunities for education more than we have. I'm a proud proponent of tuition-free college. I think it's important to offer that to students. I am a proud proponent also of 0% interest rate loans for students, and then also retroactivating that as well, because you come out of school these days and you've got mountains and mountains of debt. My husband and I together, we went to grad school and undergrad at Ball State, and we came out and our loans together were almost as much as our mortgage. And we had 4 kids who also then went to college. So I kind of wish I would have got into Congress and then enacted this so it could affect my family. But I'm okay with the idea that, hopefully it can help yours. But yeah, and also I'm not of the mind that again, just because I talk to a lot of fathers that are really concerned about their monies and their being able to provide for their families, that that Main Street or that Main Street is doing as well as Wall Street. I believe that we need to make legislation that just makes it easier for the common man and builds families. So.
You had a follow-up?
Yes. Are you in favor of the tax cuts being made permanent?
The corporate tax cuts or the
Yes.
ones that affect us?
Both.
Okay, because I think the ones that affect the common man are going to be expiring within 4 to 5 years, right?
Right.
And then the ones that affect the corporations don't expire. So I guess it just seems to me that it seems rather strange that the monies that we've received, there's expiration date on that, which it really isn't that much when it really comes down to it. So yeah, I would say I'm in support of it when it makes sense.
I think by the time these tax cuts expire, I'd like to see us totally redo our tax code and simplify it, get rid of a lot of the tax breaks, and let's say really make it more about raising the revenue that we need and a more fair across the board tax. So I would say no, I wouldn't be in favor of making them permanent, just because I'd like to see us, by the time those do expire, come up with something radically different.
To follow up, you say something radically different. Let's talk about taxes for a little bit, because there's been a lot of conversation for a lot of years that the tax code is burdensome, needs to be reworked. You should be able to do your taxes on a postcard or any number of things. What specifically would you like to see changed in the tax code that could make it simpler, easier, and raise the revenue that we need? Tom, I think you start this one.
I mean, first of all, I would do away with a lot of the tax credits and the things on there that are, they're in there essentially to help people, but when you look at how they impact people and how they take away incentive. I mean, one of the things I looked at a couple of years ago, I'd had somebody call me who was not a client of mine, but a friend of mine, and his wife was making about $35,000 a year. He went to work at the school as an aide, basically making $10,000 a year, and he said, we feel like we're just not getting ahead. We thought we'd have this extra money, but we don't. Well, basically 60% of what he was making was going back to the government in taxes because they were losing all these tax credits they had. And these tax credits are also a great source of fraud, where we have people claiming other dependents that aren't theirs, stealing people's identities. And I think we need to get closer to a flat tax, very simple, similar to how like Ohio cities and Kentucky cities and counties do it, where you're just paying a flat percentage of your revenue, and then we need to find other ways to help families rather than doing tax credits to the tax code, where basically you're having tax preparers serve as social workers trying to help people get their benefits. And we just need to find a different way to pass out social benefits than through the tax code.
Well, right now, I believe that only 47% of American residents, 47% do not actually pay taxes because they don't make enough money. 53% of us that do make a little bit more, we're actually, it's our taxes that are actually paying for everybody else, which is kind of sad. So if we raise up the minimum wage, when we can give more people opportunity to put money into the system, I think that's certainly something that I think is important and I would advocate for. I personally also don't believe that there's great fraud. I know that there is some fraud, a lot of people and a lot of families that I know, if they don't have that tax credit and that money is not coming in, do you realize what they do with that money? A lot of them get caught up on their bills because they're behind on their bills. A lot of them pay their credit cards off. A lot of them go out and buy furniture because they haven't had furniture in a while. A lot of them pay their their children's college bills because they usually come in the spring, January, February, March, when they're getting those tax refund. We call it refund rich. So you're refund rich for about a month, but then you got to go back to that $7.25 an hour job. So no, I don't have a problem with tax credits at all. They do need to be codified to those that actually deserve them, and I don't believe in fraud, obviously, but I certainly would think that every single tax credit that is given to families needs to stay.
Yeah, and those families that don't pay taxes, a lot of them aren't necessarily low income. I mean, I see tax returns of people who make over $100,000 that have 5 kids, and they actually get money back from the government above what they've paid in. They're only paying 0 taxes. They're getting money from the government on their tax returns with all of this. So they're, and that kind of comes to another thing of, if somebody is the, if you want to have 12 kids, at what point do the taxpayers need to stop subsidizing your personal choice to have more children? And currently there's no limit on those kind of things.
In preparation for this conversation, I put 3 words into Google: sensible gun law. For some people, there is no such thing. Those 3 words mean you want to come take away our guns. Can sensible gun laws and the Second Amendment coexist for you? And if so, what does that look like? Janine?
Well, I'm a proponent of the Second Amendment. My family has guns. While I don't have a gun in my home, my dad, when I was growing up, he had about 15 guns underneath his bed, and he didn't even have it locked at the time. But he was a firm disciplinarian, and he's a big guy, and we knew without a doubt that we're not supposed to touch those guns, and we did not touch those guns. Yeah, I have 14 siblings. My mom and dad were married for 46 years, and 12 brothers and 2 sisters, and we did not touch the guns. And so therefore my brothers, several of them are also gun owners. My children, I have 3 sons now, they're all permitted to have guns. A couple of them have guns. So I know that you can be a responsible gun owner. I actually have, I have a bodyguard myself since I'm running for office, and times when you just never know. And there's been a couple of situations where, I was concerned about my safety. I don't think there's really a lot of discussions about people that are responsible that have guns, but 97 to 98% of Americans on both sides, Republicans, or 3 sides, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, across the board, 97 to 98%, which is a huge number, they actually believe that there should be common sense gun reform. What we want is, what makes sense is to be able to drop our children off at school and to know that they're going to come back. We want to know that what happened down in Noblesville, West Middlesex School, won't happen here. Or in your district. What we want to know is that that people that are mentally impaired and limited won't have easy access to guns. What we want to know is that the FBI can't come to a resident in Richmond who's having some trouble 15 times like they did in Parkland and somehow their guns are given back to them. What we want to know is that there's a network nationwide that has a checks and balance system, that if you're messing up in California, you're checked there, and you can't drive all the way to Indiana and take out a gun and kill our kids. What I say is this: we need to make it a hell of a lot harder for these persons that are dangerous to come and slaughter our children, because that's what they're doing. For years and years and years, I have 4 children. My youngest is a senior right now. I would send them off to school, and I would pray. I'm a person of faith, and I believe in protection ultimately. But the bottom line is we need policy, and we need common sense policy that will allow these children, and also not only the children, but us adults that are in public settings, whether it's church. They had that terrible shooting, I think it was in Charleston several years ago, in a Bible study. We're in Bible study every 2 or 3, we're at church a couple times a week. We adults want to make sure that we're safe. Movie theaters. This past Monday was the first year celebration of the shooting in Nevada. I think it was out west. 58 people killed, 400 and some other people injured. We have to know. We have to make it extremely, extremely much more difficult to have access, for people to have access to guns to harm other people. Not to mention suicides are part of that. There's a mother's group, Moms Demand Action, which is trying to address that problem. There's children that are killing themselves with their own parents' guns. Think about how terrible that is for you if you realize that your son or your daughter took their own life with your weapon. We have to make sure that every single gun owner has a safety storage plan. That if you've got a gun, you need to make sure that you have it locked up safe. The Delaware County Sheriff's Department, as well as the Wayne County Sheriff's Department, they give out free locks for guns. Get those if you don't have them. Make a plan. If you've got a gun, you need to be responsible for it.
Yeah, and I guess I feel like we already have common sense gun laws for the most part. I mean, many of the times when you see these high-profile shootings, the person was not legally allowed to own a gun already on the laws that were in effect. We do need better communication among the states and among the agencies. We need better follow-up, and our agencies need to be properly funded. It's another thing of looking at where is our government spending their money, what things should they never have been involved in to begin with, because one of the number one priorities of a government should be to protect its citizens. And if we're spending money on things that the government should not have been involved in, we're shorting our law enforcement agencies. And so they do need to have the resources they need to make sure that mentally unstable people that should not have a gun permit aren't getting guns. They need those resources to be able to do their follow-ups. And there needs to be some accountability with them. And a lot of these things, such as a safe storage plan and giving out locks, are great things, but they shouldn't be. They should be government encouraged, but not government mandated.
Okay. One of you mentioned earlier tariffs. I'm not going to really ask you to define all of the current aspects of the tariffs that we have, but if you're not in favor of the tariffs, what would the alternative be? How do we make trade fair? And that's a big jump from this last topic.
Let me just say this. One of the things I like about Donald Trump, even though I'm not a fan, and I did vote for him, I like the fact that he's willing to try new things. I like the fact that he wants to put America first. I like the fact that he says, what, we're tired of these people bullying us, and we want China to do something better. Now, the thing that I don't like about him, it seems like he's prideful. Because this has been going on for months and months and months now, and he just recently put $200 billion more in tariffs on products that affect us every day that we get now at Walmart. Seasonings, food seasonings, hygiene products. I mean, there's so many products. It's so many products. It's not working. It's not working. And so what I would tell President Trump is, while I applaud you for what you're trying to do and what other people haven't done before, because I don't think they've done it to this extent. And maybe, my hope is that it does work, but it needs to work pretty fast because it is having a detrimental effect. Also, I believe that, that in terms of making friends, with some of the countries that we have been alienating recently, it's concerning to me that, like with Canada, although that they came along recently and they've done some different things, so we're encouraged by that. But let's get a better sense of what we want in the long run instead of just being bullying other countries. But I do applaud him. I think that's one of the things I actually like about him.
Tom,
Yeah.
if you are not in favor of the tariffs, what is the alternative? How do we balance trade so that it's fair?
Yeah, and obviously it takes a lot of negotiation, and we've seen with this new North American trade agreement that they closed a lot of loopholes in the old one, and that's one of the things of when a new tax bill gets passed, we might see months later a technical correction act that corrects unintended things in the bills. But when you sign a trade agreement, you're stuck with it. You can't just make the other country make adjustments for unintended
no
consequences.
reset button?
Yeah, there's no reset button on that. So I think the North American trade agreement, we had some success there in getting it, and some of it's going to be just some hardline negotiations, but ultimately it's going to come down to us as consumers. We've got to look at where our products come from, how they're manufactured. We talked about if we don't want tariffs and we want to raise our minimum wage, how can we keep buying from countries that are paying people 20 cents an hour and expect to do that? And some of that just has to be that, us as consumers making that decision of we're going to look at where our products come from and not sell out to the cheapest provider. We've got the same thing on, the whole environmental issues. When I look at the whole Paris Agreement and see that China really, back to their report to the UN, got rejected for being totally false, but at some point it doesn't make sense to keep pushing our corporations to become more environmentally friendly at a higher cost, and yet we'll go down to Walmart and buy all the cheap Chinese stuff we can when they're putting a new coal-fired electrical plant into place every week. And so a lot of this comes down to us as consumers to be more disciplined.
You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're down to about our last 20 minutes of the conversation. Told you it would go by pretty quickly. We got a couple of questions that came in via email. We want to make sure that we try to get our viewer questions in, so let's go to the first one. How would you represent the common person? How would you represent the common person, Tom?
I mean, basically, I think I am the common person. I mean, I was raised in a blue-collar family with 6 kids. I've worked with kids here in Richmond all my life, kids that were economically disadvantaged and of very racially diverse groups that we've worked with. So, and even in my professional life, I mean, I worked for a few years with a regional CPA firm that worked with very high-income people, and that just wasn't fulfilling to me. That we decided, well, I'd rather not make as much money, but work with more of just the regular people and small business owners that are more local people. And so as far as representing them, you have to listen to everyone. And one of the things is I don't take any campaign money from any corporations or any special interests. Too many people go to Washington and they've got to repay the people who paid to get them elected. And I mean, once again, it's something where just we as voters have to hold people accountable and look at that. And, you know, I mean, they've established we can't pass laws to keep people from giving them money or corporations from giving them money. So, you know, the voters need to look at that and to look at, okay, who's really elected by the people and running for the people and who's running on behalf of special interests.
Janine?
Well, I believe that I'm kind of a person that is definitely representative of the common woman, common man. I've started out my life as a person that was part of a family that was poverty-ridden. We were always near the poverty line. There were many times that I went to school hungry. We didn't have as many programs that we have now to be able to have breakfast and lunch and things. We had lunch, but we didn't have all the extras. Nowadays, they're actually sending kids home with bags of, right here in Wayne County, they actually send you home on the weekends with food because there's a need for that. So, you know, I can relate to being there, but also can relate throughout my life because I did work hard and I was blessed with opportunities along the way with good people that loved me and cared about me and then kind of convalesced around our family to now be in a different strata because I have worked for 30 years as a journalist and as an entrepreneur. You know, I'm not in the lower brackets anymore. I'm a little bit upper middle class, and I'm thankful for that. So I can relate, but you know, even though I'm there now, I can relate to, you know, the struggles of families. I can relate to what it means to have the food stamps. And back in the day, we had the food stamps, not the food stamp card. I know what it means when you have to, you know, look down at your gas light and you think, you know, it's Wednesday and I still got 2 more days till payday. I always say that there's a little campaign that I want to do before the election, and it says, kind of like when they had that thing a few years ago, you know, you're from Indiana if this happens. Well, I say this, and you know you're an Indiana voter that would vote for Janine Lake if you've experienced what it means to, you know, be concerned because your light bill is due tomorrow and you don't have enough to get it paid. I know what that feels like. I knew what that felt like as a young person that was not yet done with college, and you know, I had just a few more months before I'd get my financial aid again. I know what it feels like when, you know, you don't have enough to, you know, as a child, you don't have exactly what you need as, you know, as a young child that needs clothing and food, and you know. What it takes to just, you know, be okay. So I can relate to all those concerns. And I don't think that, I know that Tom can probably relate because, like he said, I know a little bit about him. But I know that one of our staunchest competitors, I guess, our opponent, Greg Pence, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and he doesn't quite know what it feels like to be one of us. I don't mean that as an attack. I'm just saying that as the reality that it is. He's $30 million is how much his latest, I guess, cumulative wealth is. And I know that people are concerned that he's going to go to Washington and forget us, but I don't know that he even knows us. He hasn't. He's been part of the elite group in Washington D.C. All these years that kind of. They've got their other agenda, and like Tom said about going, just being the type of people that don't necessarily relate to the needs of the 6th district, and that's something that I believe that I could still do, and will do.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about immigration. What is your thoughts on our current position towards immigration, but more so as it relates to dreamers? That's a word that we hear used more recently. So what is your position on immigration, how we should confront it, and what do we do with the young children, the dreamers?
Okay. Well, I guess the dreamers weren't really young children. Anybody coming into the DREAM Act are getting to be a little bit older. And I kind of go back to the same thing I said on Social Security and Medicare. I think President Obama made a promise to those people, and we should keep it. I think they need a path to citizenship. Many of them would not even speak the language in the country they would have to go back to, since this is all they've known. And I don't like the idea of incentivizing people to bring. We don't want a bunch of children coming here unaccompanied. We're still seeing that. And, kids are dying, making a dangerous journey. We don't want to encourage that. But for those kids that were part of that DACA program of years ago, I think we need to give them a path to citizenship. I think they almost had that in agreement, and somehow it broke down, and neither side would come back to the table, that nobody would be the adult in the room and come and do that. But on immigration itself, we need to secure our borders. We need to enforce the laws. I'm for very open borders, but you can't do that in a country that has a very generous welfare system. You also have to enforce the laws or you have chaos. One of the things we're seeing on the people coming in, not only is the journey dangerous for them, but we're concerned about weapons, we're concerned about drugs, and we know they flow across that southern border. And we know that many of the people who are just trying to come here to get a better life have to go through cartel territory, and they're being enlisted as drug mules. And it's not anything they want to do, but it's the only way for them to get through is to agree to that. I think there's things that we can do with our embassies and with our consulates in Mexico and Central America. As we said, our country needs workers right now. There should be ways to hire people through those consulates and through those embassies and get them safe passage into the country under green cards. We obviously need more workers. I say that the jobs are going unfilled that many of them could fill. And there's ways we can get that done, and we need to work to do that.
There's a couple of things that I've learned after talking to many of the people here in the 6th District. One, we all want strong borders. Nobody wants people to come in and bring in drugs and more problems here. Nobody wants that. At the same time, too, we all want better immigration laws and policies. I've got a couple stories. The first is there's a business out in Cambridge City, and the guy was telling me about the fact that he's had many undocumented, I don't know, I've got to be honest when I say this, how I say this, but he's known of many undocumented workers that are part of, organization that have not caused any trouble. They're part of the community. They're trying to go through naturalization and to become citizens, but they're not there yet. But his family loves that family. His family is concerned about those type of people that are right here in the 6th District. I also know that there's many mothers that are concerned about the same thing that I am, and that is mothers being separated from their children. If you're a mother and you've cared about your children, you've been a good mother, I don't care, if you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or whatever, you are not going to sit there and be okay with a child being ripped from their mother's arms. You certainly aren't going to be okay when the government says not only is that okay, but the employees can't come and comfort a child. That's not American. That's not American at all. Another story is a young lady I know in Jefferson County. She's one of the dreamers, and she's going through college right now. She's been supported by her community. They're trying to make sure that she's able to get the assets that she needs to be able to dream and to be here safely. We want to make sure that we support good legislation for immigration policies, and it's time for us to really come back to the table.
And the whole immigration thing is just one more example of how Congress being broken has really impacted our country. I mean, Congress has not been doing its job. I mean, DACA should not have been done by a presidential order. I mean, too many things are being done by presidential proclamation, and everybody thinks it's great when they like the president, then the other person gets in, and all of a sudden we don't like this anymore. And Congress has let the executive office push and take more of their basic responsibility. I mean, Congress is enacted with all legislative duties and passing laws, and they've sat back quietly watching the presidents taking more and more authority upon themselves, and a lot of that has been due to the fact that Congress won't work together anymore, and we need to send people to Washington that will work with other people and get that fixed.
Yeah, I said I'm going to probably not be very popular when I get to Congress because I'm going to be giving out the rubber spine awards when I get there. There's the people that we got to stand up for American people. We have to make sure that we put people before party. And, whether or not it's education or the DACA situation, we have to have adults in the room that are going to be courageous.
We've got about 7 minutes left. Many in the medical community believe that there could be life-saving treatments unlocked if research were allowed to take place, but getting approval for research happens to be a daunting task at this point. You probably know where I'm going. Is it time for the federal government to get out of regulating marijuana?
I think so. There's a doctor in Indianapolis right now that literally is doing surgeries in which she is not even giving out opioid prescription drugs. She's looking at other avenues to be able to help patients. It's way beyond time for us to consider other options. Medical marijuana is something that we have to consider. It helps with tremors. It helps with other medical issues. It's well documented, and also I just believe that people are going. Obviously they're going around the bend to bend rules and kind of to be able to get the marijuana that they need to be able to help with their health problems and their mental health problems sometimes. I'm definitely an advocate of that.
I mean, yes, that's been a position in the Libertarian Party for years, and I think people looked at the Libertarians just a lot of stoners just because of that. They've made such a big issue out of that one issue. But as you said, like with the childhood tremors, they've known for years they could extract the oil out of there that would not have the THC and would not have the downsides to it. That has been the only thing that have helped on that. We've got 68,000 veterans that are addicted to opioids or heroin. Many of them were treated with painkillers that they became addicted to, and we know that there are properties of marijuana that could have more effectively treated them without causing any kind of addiction. And the fact that it's been a Schedule I drug means that they couldn't even do any research on marijuana. And unfortunately, a lot of the common sense bills out there have been blocked by representatives who got hundreds of thousands of dollars for their campaigns from drug companies. And so once again, it's a thing of people going to Washington and serving special interest and not the people.
Okay, we're down to our last 5 minutes, so a kind of quick question to wrap us up. Do you believe in term limits? And if you were to win, would you term limit yourself at some point, and what would that number of years be? Tom?
Yes, I do believe in term limits. That's one of the policies I have on my website. I think congressional terms should be changed to 4 years so people aren't campaigning all the time, and people should be limited to 4 terms in the House. I think senators should be limited to 3 6-year terms. If after 16 years or 18 years you can't train someone to take your place, but it should be part of the thing of being a leader is bringing somebody up to take your place. As far as the limit upon myself, I could not imagine serving more than 10 years. I'm starting to have grandkids. I'm sure I want to spend more time with them. And there's probably only so much time I could put up with everything that goes on in Washington. So,
Janine?
I too believe in term limits. I believe that you get there, and then the people that are there right now and have been there seem to lose contact if they're there too long. So I do believe that. Although I think the terms themselves, in terms of the House, maybe the Senate is fine for 6 years, but the House is every 2 years, and so that you're kind of always campaigning. So I think that should be a little bit longer, even if it's 4 years. But yeah, if I were to, when I'm elected, I'm going to run 3 times. If the limits stay the same, so I'll be in there for 6 years, then I plan to run for Senate, and then I'm going to run for President of the United States of America.
Okay. Hopefully you'll still come back and visit us.
I will.
Okay. Janine Lee Lake, Tom Furkenhoff, thank you both very much for being here, running for the 6th Congressional District.
Thank you for having us.
Democrat and Libertarian. There is a Republican, Greg Pence. He was invited to be here. He was not able to be with us.
Where's Greg?
And I'm sorry?
I said, where's Greg?
Okay. Brian Ballenger, thank you for being here with us this evening. You are back on the 18th.
Yes.
Okay. You have a very short period of time left if you are not registered to vote for one of these folks or one of the other races that's going on, and there are other races that are going on. I know our primary kind of wrapped up a number of races, but it was not all of them. There are races going on, and we'll go through some of those that we'll be talking to here shortly. But want to remind you, voter registration ends on Tuesday, October 9th. Get registered Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. Voter registration office is 301 East Main Street. You can also register to vote online at indianavoters.com. I mentioned that we are going to have 3 more In Focus candidate forums after this one next week. October 11th, we'll be talking with state representative candidates running for Indiana State Representative District 56. On the 18th, Wayne County Council District 3. And on October 25th, Indiana State Senate District 27. Also, there are a couple of chances for you to talk to candidates in person. October 9th, 6 to 9 p.m., Golay Community Center, corner of State Road 1 and US 40 in Cambridge City. Those are the general election races, and you can see those listed there on the screen. And then on October 16th, the following Tuesday at Hartley Hills Country Club, you'll have a chance to talk to and ask questions of candidates running for Nettle Creek School Board at Large, Western Wayne, Centerville Amington, and Northeastern School Districts. Also, we will be in-person. Absentee voting will take place beginning on October 10th. That's Monday, 8:30 to 5. Tuesday, 8:30 to 4:30. That's Tuesday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 at the voter registration office, 301 East Main Street. That will also be open on 2 Saturdays, October 27th and November 3rd from 9 to 4. Also, we will be telling you soon when the early voting will also take place. The vote centers will again be open, and we'll give you a list of those locations. And then a reminder once again that we will be here election night. Melissa Vance and I will be here beginning at 6 p.m. Join us as we go through 2-3 hours waiting for all of the votes to come in. Hopefully it'll be a process where there are a lot of votes to count. If you missed parts of this show, replays of this program can be seen tonight beginning at 10:30, tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, Saturday 8 a.m. and 9 p.m., Sunday 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. The audio of this program can be heard at 6 a.m. on both ESPN 100.9 FM and G1013, and it will also be available on WGTV online. We'll be back next Thursday night for another edition of the In Focus Candidate Forum, so we hope you will join us there. If you have questions, be sure to email us at wctv@iue.edu. Have a great weekend.